I'm Aryeh Schwartz, along with my co-hosts, Gabe Ibrahim and Rachel Galligan, and welcome to the Winsidr Show, where it's all about the W. Today, we're talking mid-free agency power rankings. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. Today, we're talking WNBA mid-free agency power rankings, and since I wanted to do way too early predictions of who's going to win the championship, I'm going to kick it to Gabe to break down how we're going to do this episode. Gabe.
Yes, this is going to be a slightly more thoughtful experiment. So we're going to break out these teams into tiers. I have 4 tiers. So here's what, I think everyone is somewhat familiar with the concept of tier. This is how I treat it. Within each tier, the teams are largely the same. So I am ranking the teams in each tier, but they are largely the same in that I'm just splitting hairs trying to find differences between them. I think each tier is very close to one another and it's very hard to separate. It's not that confusing, but you'll just see when we get to it. Okay, so I'm starting with my top tier. Favorites to win the title. For me, there are 4 favorites in this order. Los Angeles is number 1, Seattle, Washington, and Connecticut. So those 4 teams are in my tier 1. I could see any of them winning the title easily. LA is my number 1 just because I love how deep their roster is. I love all the star power, and I think Kristi Toliver is exactly what they needed. Seattle is there because they may have the best player in the world. They have championship experience, and they have a very deep roster of role players and know what they're doing. Washington is there for all of the same reasons that Seattle is there. So we might have to quibble about whether Breanna Stewart is better than Elena Delle Donne. That's a different podcast. And then Connecticut is my 4th team there. And that's predicated on them having Courtney Williams come back. Obviously, we've all heard the rumblings about her, but if she comes back, I think that is a championship favorite. And even if they're not, I think they have a good argument. So those are my tiers, guys. What do you guys think?
Rachel, I'll let you break down why he's wrong first.
I agree with most of that, 75% of it. It's hard for me to include LA in that category. I just can't. I have to put LA down. I have to knock them down 1. I think after everything that transpired last year, there was a lot of drama, a lot of locker room drama. I think there's a ton of question marks that can be asked with LA and what is going to come of this organization. I get that there's a ton of star power, but from what I saw last year, how does that translate to now? How does that get better under the Derek Fisher regime? I have been extremely critical of LA, and I'm not trying to be negative about it. I just, from what we saw throughout that season, I think there's a ton of question marks. Do they have the talent? Absolutely. Do I love the move with Kristi Toliver joining them and everything she brings to the table from a leadership perspective, from a consistency standpoint of a lot of big names who've won championships together in the past? Yes. I just have some very serious question marks with this leadership, very, very serious question marks with kind of what direction that is, where that is headed. I have question marks with Candace Parker and the chemistry amongst this team. So that is exactly why I disagree with you on that one.
Can I respond? I'm going to respond. I think you bring up really valid points. I'm too concerned. My biggest concern coming into the offseason was how Fisher is going to deal at the end of 2019 and how he's going to communicate with his players. But getting Kristi Toliver really, really helps that problem because she is literally an NBA coach. She's a really good coach. She really helped the Mystics last year communicate amongst themselves and with the coaching staff. So I think she's going to close the gap a little bit there. And I think health is going to be a big deal. Candace Parker is going to be there all year, getting meshed in with this group. I also think Brittany Sykes is a very, very strong move by LA bringing her in because she provides good defense. She's efficient without the ball, and she's not going to care if she has to be bumped to the bench. At least from what we know about Brittany Sykes, you never know until people get in that position. But she may get bumped to the bench in some matchups for either Raquana Williams or Chinea Gumake at the end of games. So she has to be able to accept that, and I think she will be able to. So those are the reasons that I'm willing to put them up there. But I think your concerns about the coaching staff, the communication, and the chemistry on this team are really valid. I just think Christy helps that a lot, and I think Brittany Sykes also helps that a lot.
Yeah, I hear what you're both saying, and I'll get into what my ranking is later. But as you know, I couldn't fully agree with Gabe, and I can't fully agree with Rachel. I'm not gonna put the Mystics in title favorite. I part of me wants to, just out of respect for the defending champions, but losing Christy Tolliver for the reasons you just said, Gabe, for me knocks them out of title favorite. For me, I respect the other teams, I understand what they're doing, and I respect the Mystics, and I understand what they're doing. But to lose such a key starter like her for the whole season, we're not talking about her being around the team and not playing for a few games because of an injury, which we saw this past season. We're talking about her presence not being there from training camp to the finals. And for me, that's a huge blow to the team and knocks them out of title favor.
Yeah, I mean, I can also see that because everyone who has listened to this podcast knows how much of a Christy Tolliver fan I am. But I think Leilani Mitchell brings some of the stuff on the court that you see from Christy's game. She's not as good of a she's not as good of a ball handler. She's not good of a player. Let's be real. She's not as good of a player as Christy Tolliver. But I do think Ariel Atkins, Ariel Powers, those two are going to take big step forward. I think this team has the experience from last season to kind of weather those storms that come. A championship makes you a veteran almost, just because of how much work you have to put into it. So I think they're going to come, and they're going to both the Ariels are going to be better. I think Leilani Mitchell is going to help a lot with missing Christy Tolliver. So to me, they have Elena Deladon. They have a deep bench. They have a deep team, and they have a really good coach. So I can't put them at title favoritism because of those reasons.
No, I hear you. Real quick, I'll just say, and I'll let Rachel have a chance too to say what her title favorite kind of order is. For me, and this is with the asterisk of Courtney Williams being on this roster. It goes Connecticut Sun, Seattle Storm, and then the LA Sparks. That's my order. Rachel, what about you?
This is a tough one for me. I mean, I understand that this is fun and it's good. It gets my mind thinking in a different way, but it being February 19th, I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, this is tough. Still very much trying to digest everything that's happened in the last week and a half. I was quoted on a couple of shows that I really felt like Connecticut Sun, in my mind at this point, were the favorites. And I think I have to stand by that right now at this point. That the move with Dewana Bonner was a complete game changer. I love everything that the Connecticut Sun epitomize. I love the team, the longevity, the chemistry, everything that they have done just came up short last year. So I really feel strongly that Connecticut, in my mind, are the favorites. Now, I do think that there are some question marks still. We could be a week from now having this same conversation and Courtney Williams is going to a different team. Not saying that's a fact. We don't know, but it is possible. So that does impact things a little bit. So this very much is a fluid conversation. But for me, I think it's Connecticut. After that, I have to give the nod to Washington. Any team that has Elena Deladon on it, a healthy Elena Deladon, and Emma Mieseman, what she was able to show last year. I love the Washington roster. I love their offense. I love what they've been able to do. I don't necessarily see the loss of Tolliver as this massive hit. Say, Gabe, I know that's going to kill you. I
Easy with your next words here, Rachel.
I don't see
We're very good friends, but that could end quickly.
I don't see it as a huge, tremendous loss with the pieces they have on this team and just kind of the shot selections combined with just the way Tolliver plays. And in some ways, when I watched Washington, it almost felt like she stuck out like a sore thumb in some ways. And that's going to really probably rub a lot of people wrong. And that's not a knock to Christy
Yes,
Tolliver.
me in particular. That rubs me the wrong way.
It just kind
I'm with you, Rachel.
There were moments where it was like, I don't know. It's really hard for me to put it into. I've been critical on Christy Tolliver, which is I know very, very scary to do because she's a phenomenal player. I really have, but I question that fit any longer than what it has been. I think at this point it's ran its course, and it's best for her to go on to a new setting. And I love the fit with LA, as I just said in the previous segment. So for me, I don't see Washington taking a big time hit from an offensive standpoint, from a leadership role. From an experience perspective, they're champions. So Washington has to be up there in the conversation. I think Phoenix, that they're not in my title favorites, so I'm not going to talk about them quite yet. I think we talk about Seattle, but there are some question marks there. But I do think that what Seattle did 2 years ago with a healthy Brianna Stewart, and obviously Sue Bird out on the floor, was special. So we're all just kind of sitting here assuming that is what's going to happen again. But there are question marks there, from a health perspective that are a little bit of an unknown. So they're my third, and I'm just going to keep it at 3 with that. It's hard for me to talk about Phoenix as a title favorite. It's hard for me to talk about the Las Vegas Aces as a title favorite right now. I have to just keep it at 3.
All right, Gabe, talk to me about the next tier, contenders.
So my contenders group, I think this team is largely defined by them not being as good as the teams above them. I think these teams can all, if you told me now on February 19th that any of these teams won the championship, would not be that surprised. But for now, I'm considering them as there's a meaningful difference between these next 3 teams and the teams that I had above them, that we just talked about. So my 3 contenders are Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Chicago. So for Vegas, obviously, I mean, they have potentially the best array of talent. Just top tier talent, because A'ja Wilson, Liz Cambage, and if we get 90% of Adriel McCoughtry, that might do it. That might be the best collection of talent as far as 3 players go in the league. And then you add in Kelsey Plum, De'Erica Hamby, Kayla McBride, Jackie Young. You have a bunch of talented players here on this roster, and you have a really, really good coach behind them in Bill Laimbeer. The reason that they're not in the favorites category is because of those spacing issues that you have seen everyone talk about online. This team has 2 people who are good shooters from outside the paint. That's Kayla McBride, that's Kelsey Plum. Jackie Young showed a little bit of that. Liz Cambage can shoot from outside, but that's not really where you want her. And then everyone else is kind of someone that needs to get in the lane to score. So we'll have to see how Angel McCoughtry is changing her game as she ages. Hopefully she can add a little bit more of a jump shot, because she'll need to spot up on this team. I'm concerned about that, but I'm also pretty confident in Bill Laimbeer to figure out some way to make this at least somewhat efficient. Phoenix.
Oh. Yeah, go. No, sorry, go. No, I agree with you completely.
So for Phoenix, I'll keep this one shorter. Phoenix, they obviously added Skylar Diggins-Smith, who is, a superstar in this league, both on and off the court. She's going to be a great pick and roll partner for Brittany Griner. I think they obviously have Diana Taurasi, who, in my opinion, is the greatest player of all time. That's another podcast, Aryeh.
She ain't. It's Simone Augustus. But
okay.
Continue.
Moving on. So they have Diana Taurasi, Skylar Diggins-Smith, Brittany Griner. That puts them in the conversation. However, again, we're talking about some fit issues. I'm really concerned about their depth. They blew a lot of money on Bria Hartley, who, she's a good player, but we got to see how she works in this roster. And then their next best player is Brian January, who is coming off the bench. And then they have a lot of rookies, a lot of young players. And, I'm very concerned about their depth. So that's why they're not in the favorites category. And I am a little bit concerned about the diminishing returns with Skylar and Diana Taurasi, since they're both so good in the pick and roll. And for the last team, Chicago, I think they're really good. I think they got a little bit better. I'm concerned about Aryeh Stevens' health. If she is healthy, this team probably moves into the top category. But For now, it's pretty much the same team as the one they had last year, and all the teams we just mentioned either got better or were better last year. So I love what James Wade has up there. We'll see if Diamond the Shield can somehow take an even further step forward. If Aryeh Stevens is healthy, if Gabby Williams finds a role, then we're in business, and then they're probably in that top group. But for now, I'm putting them in the second group. So Vegas, Phoenix, and Chicago are my contenders.
So I'm going to throw a total wrench in this, and I know Sky Show Shy is going to be so pissed at me, and I'm just creating, billboard or whatever material right now, chalkboard material. I'm going to have to knock the Sky out of the contenders tier, in my opinion, and here's why. The things you just said. The team did not, everybody else who's above them or who's in the contender or title favorite category really made moves to either, strengthen the depth or just straight up change the face of how powerful this team is. The Sky did not do that. They lost to Stu, which to me is a huge blow. And I'm not saying that it's this player for this player, but I am going to say it. I'd keep her over Dolson, if you ask me. I freaking love getting Stevens. I'm all aboard the Stevens hype train,
Yes.
And I'm a huge Diamond to Shields fan. So I understand people are going to jump off of me. I'm saying right now, I need to see that Stevens is healthy. We haven't seen her play in a very long time. There's a lot of question marks surrounding that. And for me to, if you're talking about a healthy Stevens who can make some growth, even though she didn't, I'm just going to chalk it up as she didn't play last year because she barely did. If you see growth from her, then fine, we can move them into contender in my book. But besides that, I have a lot of trouble putting this team at contender. Rachel, any thoughts?
I love your analysis. That's actually one of the best breakdowns I've heard from you in a while. Good job.
Oh.
Hey. Okay, so
Guys.
are you wanting me to go through my contenders?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll do my order real quick. I got Mystic, Aces, Mercury for contenders, but Rachel, talk to me.
Yeah, I don't want to be too repetitive, but I think I put the Mystics with title favorites. But my contenders are Aces, Mercury, Sky, LA. And that, I talked about LA already. I think that they, with all of these teams right here, the biggest question mark is, we're trying to gauge them from what we saw last season. And we could talk about the Aces. This is a young team. This is a very dynamic and personality-driven group of women, a team that is still very much learning to play together, work together. We saw them hit their stride at moments. We saw them hit some lows at a lot of moments. So I think the jury is still out with the Aces and kind of the experience and how does that continue to grow? How does the addition of a personality and a player like Angel McCautry go in and fit, with the star power that the Aces have. I'm just very curious, probably more than I even was last summer, as to how all that fits together. I think Mercury, we've talked about them being contenders, it feels like, for the last 10 years, and for good reason. They've got one of the greatest players in the history of the game, Diana Taurasi, and I love the addition of Skylar Diggins-Smith. I think it's exactly the move she needed to make. I think it's we talk about a big three in Griner, Taurasi, and Skylar Diggins. Even though they lose a Dewana Bonner, which is a big hit for them, you can never truly replace a Dewana Bonner because in my mind she's extremely unique from her versatility. Being able to play really any position, and also what she brings from an offensive output perspective. So the Mercury are just going to be different, but at the end of the day, you've got Brittany Griner inside as a rim protector and as that big that can really arguably be unmatched in this league at times. And when Griner is playing, when Griner is engaged, she's unstoppable. When Diana Taurasi is healthy, then I think you have to put an asterisk next to that. That's a huge question mark. How is Taurasi going to be? So if everyone's healthy, if everyone's gelling well and they're playing, of course, they can compete with anybody. I already talked about LA, so I'm not going to get in that too much. I mean, that's a given. It's the lowest that LA needs to be is from a contender standpoint. A lot of people will disagree with me and would have them up there as title favorites. But I think the Chicago Sky are very interesting. Diamond to Shields has to take that next jump consistently before I could really sit here and talk about, them being a very serious title favorite. Now, we saw a lot of group change, like change from them. We saw a lot of growth from them. Obviously, you've got arguably one of the top 2 point guards in the league, and Courtney Vandersloot. Allie Quigley's been as steady as anyone else in the history in the WNBA. Bringing back Dolson, and so the Sky have a lot to build on. I see them continuing to get better from what they were last year, but a lot of that falls on the shoulders of Diamond DeShields, who had some really big words to say during the All-Star break. I don't know if you guys saw that, but she kind of said, like, nobody else can do what I can do in this league, and I agree with her. I love Diamond DeShields.
Completely agree with her.
She's incredible. She's in a league of her own in terms of what she can do. I just think now she's at the point of her career where she has to take that next jump. And I'm talking about like MVP caliber jump, where she's in the conversation of being a top 5 player in the league. And we're arguably, talking about voting for her as the most valuable player. So a lot rides on her in my mind. But I do think the Sky should be in the conversation as contenders, but probably on the lower end.
All right, Gabe, break down these playoff chasers.
Okay, so we got playoff. The playoff chasers might be the wrong word here because 8 teams make the playoffs, so they're probably playoff teams. Who cares? But so the third tier of teams that were probably trying to make the playoffs, for me is two teams, Minnesota and Indiana. I would be pretty surprised if Minnesota didn't make the playoffs just because it's Cheryl Reeve. They kind of have a situation where it's just like, well, we'll figure it out and we'll make the playoffs. They're not going to win the championship unless something unforeseen happens. Like, I don't know. Fisa Collier could take that MVP jump that we're talking about for Diamond DeShields. I'd be pretty surprised because it's only year 2, but she was incredible last year, and I assume she's going to be incredible this year. And obviously Sylvia Fowles, they have Cheryl Reeve, they have a good team that is pretty deep. They have a 6 overall pick. They'll probably pick up even some more rookies that get cut. So I think that despite them not having made any moves, I don't see them falling off because of how good Cheryl Reeve is. And I think there's a plan in place, whether that's sign people next year, sign some rookie free agents, or bring over, someone like a CeCe Zandalicini and just see what she can do. And I think CeCe is a really good player. So those are all options for them. So I don't see them falling off too much. And then for Indiana, it's kind of the same deal. They're running it back. They're bringing back that entire team that was 2 games away from the playoffs. They're probably going to be better. Tiara McCowan really, really found her stride there at the end of the year. And if she gets going, then we're talking about a Griner-like person in Indiana. Someone who can man the middle, someone who can finish on pick and rolls, and has all the tools to be an excellent big in this league. Erica Wheeler, I wouldn't be surprised if she takes a slight step back just because her shooting last year was so crazy. But I also believe in Tiffany Mitchell. I also believe in Kelsey Mitchell. I believe those two will get better. Victoria and Vivian's coming back. So the team, again, I don't see them falling off too much from last year. And if they don't fall off too much from last year, I see them making the playoffs.
I sadly do not disagree with anything you have said.
Wow.
Rachel?
No, I think it's spot on. Everything you said about Minnesota, a lot. I would be sounding ridiculous if I didn't say there's a lot of question marks surrounding Minnesota right now, and that's ironic coming from me, anyone who's been following. But I think we are probably fooling ourselves if we are stepping back and questioning Cheryl Reeve in any way, or there is a plan in place, there's a strategy in place. What we have become so accustomed to seeing in Minnesota for so many years is not reality anymore. So having to retool and rebuild a lot of those things, they take several off seasons. It's going to be a few years here where we're looking back on this 5 years from now and making sense of kind of the decisions that Cheryl Reeve and the Minnesota Lynx are making. So, but I mean, obviously, she's one of the most talented, one of the winningest coaches in the WNBA. So I am just very anxious to see kind of the year that Minnesota has. maybe we're going to see some moves late. Maybe we're going to see some decisions late. Maybe we're going to see some players at play that maybe we didn't necessarily anticipate. So I think that's a big question mark for me. But how do you not step back and at least know that there is a strategy in place? You have to understand that. With Indiana, it's been very quiet. It's been so quiet. I mean, I was kind of joking around at times. I said, is anybody awake over there with the Fever? And I say that in a loving way because that's one of my hometown teams. But, we look at this roster with Indiana, with Tierra McCowan. In my mind, that's an asset that cannot be traded, that will not be traded. That's someone that you are building your franchise around moving forward. And I guarantee that's what, Tamika Catchings is looking at as well. But the pieces there, even, you're bringing back Victoria Vivians, who was unable to play last year due to knee injury. And how dynamic she was in her rookie season. So I'm anxious to see still a lot of the young pieces at play here with the Fever. And I'm anxious to see the new regime coming in and kind of how that looks and how the new staff comes in and is able to kind of continue to take the torch from what Pokey Chapman and her staff had built and take it to the next level. But I know I agree with you, Gabe. To not be too long-winded, I agree with everything you said. I think the playoff chasers, if you will, on that fringe are spot on.
All right, Gabe, break down these bottom dwellers.
Well, I just we're not going to be mean to people, Aryeh. But I just want to reiterate. So Aryeh's playoff chaser tier is Chicago, Minnesota, Indiana, and Rachel's is Minnesota, Indiana. Yes. Okay. So moving on to the bottom tier. And again, look, it is February 19th. If you told me at the end of the year that one of these teams or even two of these teams made the playoffs, I wouldn't be surprised. If you told me they won the title, I'd be shocked. And I would ask, what happened to the other 9 teams? But all right, so we're in the bottom tier. And this is not even in order for me. I didn't order these guys because I was too confused. I'm too confused on them. But Atlanta, Dallas, and New York. So Atlanta has the most variability for me just because, 2 years ago, they were in the semifinals, a game away from making it to the WNBA finals. And then last year, they were terrible and couldn't hit a shot from anywhere. So I think, maybe they're going to end up somewhere in the middle and be close to the playoffs. They did add Shakina Strickland. They did add Glory Johnson. Both those players are going to help with the shooting. They're going to help with we think they're going to help with the locker room, bring people together a little bit more, and they're going to make the team fit a little bit better. They did lose Marie Gulich and Brittany Sykes, but they brought in Kalani Brown, who is an interesting piece. The thing is that they're kind of like an island of misfit toys that, it's going to take a lot of coaching to make this team make sense. Luckily, they do have a very good coach in Nikki Collin. So I think she'll figure out a way to make that all work together. On to Dallas. What hasn't happened with Dallas? They almost look like a completely new team, and they still have, by my count, they still have 4 first-round picks, 6 picks total in the 2020 draft, and they already have a full roster. So a lot's going to change with Dallas, even from now going forward, as much as it's changed already. But bringing in Katie Lou Samuelson, she makes a lot more sense with their team than Aryeh Stevens did once they brought in Astu Nador. They locked up Mariah Jefferson. She's going to be healthy. I think she's actually a really good fit next to Aryeh. And they still have Alicia Gray. They still have Kayla Thornton. They have a lot of nice pieces on this team. But I don't want to talk too much about what they're going to be. We know Mariah Jefferson's going to be on this team. We know Aryeh is going to be on this team. We're pretty sure Katie Lou Samuelson's going to be on this team. We know Kayla Thornton and Astu Nador are going to be on this team. And for now, that's pretty much it. Oh, and Taylor Hill is going to be on the team because her contract is protected, which, God, it has to be a bummer for them. Taylor, I hope she's healthy. I mean, maybe she's healthy and she can give them something.
We're going to have to, at some point, talk about that Powers for Taylor Hill trade because, boy, has that bitten them in the butt. But that's for a different episode. But
that's almost. So, they're going to look very different. but I still see them as a rebuilding team. They're trying to figure out what works around Aryeh. I think that's a good plan. And then in New York, let's see what. Well, so they're gonna get Sabrina, which is a good thing because I'm not really clear on what else is going on this roster. They brought in Alicia Clarendon, which I don't really like. I don't see how she. I mean, Sabrina's right now playing with another guard who can't really shoot, and it's working fine because she's an excellent player. I don't think that's the best way to maximize her. But they do have other good pieces on this team that are going to grow and get better. Amanda Zawi B. I hope she does not miss games for the Olympics. She might. Kia Nurse, same deal. Wow, they just have so many international players that it's again going to be hard for them to compete this year. But Tina Charles is still there for now. So again, this is another team that could look very, very different. But I think the overall idea here is that Dallas and New York are rebuilding. So they're just going to try to experiment. They're going to try to figure out what works around their young stars. And, I don't think they would be close to contention. Atlanta is trying to compete, but they'll have the 4th overall pick. So we'll have to see what happens with them. Maybe they get someone they really like and they have to start retooling their team.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. I mean, the dream is a hodgepodge. The wings are the only thing you can say about them is currently, and I don't think they're done in this free agency period, or at least, this whole like hoarding draft picks just reminds me of, playing a board game with your friends back in the day. And there's that one thing that everybody's not so sure they want a ton of, and one player just decides, I'm going to invest in getting all of that. It's like putting a hotel on a Mediterranean and Baltic if you're playing Monopoly or whatever. I don't understand what's going on there. Hopefully it works out for them. And yeah, the Liberty, I agree with you also. I mean, it's what are they doing? How many people are going to be on their roster for the complete season is the real question for me, because like you're saying, they have a very international roster. Rachel, I'm curious your thoughts on those teams.
As I sit here and listen to you guys, it's difficult for me. All right, I find I see one bottom right now, and I see that as the New York Liberty. And that's not a knock to Walt. That's not a knock to this team. I just, from what I have seen in the moves, and we're assuming that Tina Charles is still trying to be traded, that is just a huge, like, sore thumb. It's just, it doesn't even, like, I can't understand what's happening in New York. I see the potential. I see how exciting it is. I see the changes they're making and how great this is going to be. But if there is a worse team, quote unquote, in the league at this point right now, it's the New York Liberty as the bottom. It's hard for me to look at playoff chasers compared to bottom as we're in this tier and really talk about the Dallas Wings and talk about the Atlanta Dream. I think that Dallas has made really great moves this offseason. We talk about Brian Agler, and I have a ton of respect for Brian Agler because of what he's shown as a coach in this league, what he has shown he can build, what he has shown that he can win. So it's like what I talked about a little bit ago. Being able to retool a roster and make those changes sometimes takes a couple of seasons. And, Agler inherited a situation that was talented, but there was a lot of drama. And you see some of that has changed, and we've seen some changes take place in terms of Liz Cambage is now removed. Skylar Diggins talked about her unhappiness there with Dallas. So now he's almost got a clean slate in a lot of ways. So now we're looking at Agler, and he's at, ground zero of building in his mind what he feels like he can have there in Dallas. And you have a lot of potential. You have a lot of star power. And let's not discredit, Agler's ability to put pieces together and his ability to know how to win in this league. So I can't have them in contenders by any stretch of the imagination, but I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see Aryeh and a lot of these players who had a ton of experience last year as they were hitting their stride towards the end of the year. It felt like go on a little bit of run and sneak into the playoffs. I think that's very possible with Dallas. I think Atlanta Dream. This is a difficult one because I think a lot of people are confused as to what head coach Nikki Collin and that franchise is doing with Angel leaving. I think sometimes you have to understand that a situation has run its course, and that's what that was. And it was good for both parties involved. And it's the same thing with Dallas and Skylar Diggins. Sometimes a situation has run its course, and it's just best for both of the ways. And that's what I look with Atlanta and Angel, into free agency. And the decision to kind of let her go explore free agency. I see her going to Las Vegas as a huge shot in the arm for not just Angel, but also for the Dream. And I felt like after year one, Nikki Collin kind of inherited a group that was hungry. They were excited. They went and shocked the world. They had that momentum. They went in and, they were just killing it. And then they got complacent. Let's just call it what it is. They got complacent. They got happy. They were feeling themselves. They were whatever, focusing on their careers after basketball. Like a lot of things were at play there. And now it's time. We got to blow this thing up. We have got to make the changes. And I completely support what Nikki Collin is doing and just changing this roster, bringing in new pieces. And that's going to, who knows, maybe we see Tina Charles in Atlanta. That could entirely be possible. We could also see maybe Tina Charles in somewhere like Dallas. I think that it's very plausible that she's going to be traded. It's just a matter of where is that going to be. But I think Nikki Collin is doing exactly what she needs to do with this Dream roster right now. She's proven she can get a group of people together and get them on the same page and do it in a quick fashion and be able to go win some games. But, I'm very excited about both of them in particular, Dallas and Atlanta, because I think they're both being extremely strategic and turning over a lot of things that needed to be turned over and a lot of change that had to take place. My biggest question mark is with New York. And so not to get off on too much of a tangent with myself, those are just the thoughts I had with the bottom quote unquote tier of this league and kind of where they rank in my mind.
So wait, just for bookkeeping purposes, are you creating a new tier for Atlanta and Dallas, or are you throwing them into the tier with Minnesota and Indiana?
No, I'm okay with them staying on the bottom, at least the Dream and Liberty for now. I think if I had to rank them from the bottom, it would go Dallas, Dream, Liberty. It's just hard for me to distinguish a lot of the differences between, in Indiana or even necessarily like the Lynx where they are right now. There's so many question marks surrounding all 5 of these teams that it's just a huge unknown. And so we're just kind of going off specific moves or potential, but there's zero consistency with any of them right now to go off any sort of gauge. So, like I said, it's going to be interesting, 8 months from now when we're having this conversation, looking back on the season and listening to what we were saying, because it can be completely different this lower half of the league.
I just want to jump in and do my classic episode Minnesota defense. And the reason that I'm going to say this is only because I can't put the Lynx in the bottom. I keep them in the playoff chaser because they have Sylvia Fowles. When you have a superstar like that, I truly believe it's hard to be at the bottom. Now, some might say, well, what about Tina Charles? Yeah, but there is the question mark of Tina Charles at this point. And honestly, for the plethora of other reasons we listed, for me, for the Wings to make that jump to playoff chaser, they need to get someone on the level of Tina Charles, because Brian Agler is an amazing coach, as we all know. But what he does best is taking teams that have kind of spun their wheels. And honestly, I feel bad for the guy because he was kind of put into a crappy situation, for lack of a better term. He goes into a situation that has 2 superstars and was spinning their wheels. And he came in there probably ready to coach them and ready to say, hey, I can take this roster and shift it to a contender, to a title favorite. But missing out on them, I'm just saying to myself, okay, is Brian Agler every coach is good at different things, just like a player. And like I was saying, he's good at teams that kind of spin their wheel. Is he as good with a team that doesn't have the star power and kind of rebuilding a team? And that's the question that I don't know the answer to. Not necessarily, to take a crap on them. I'm just saying what I'm thinking right now.
It's a great point. Fantastic point.
Gabe, thoughts?
I don't know. My usage has been very high on this podcast, so I'm kind of running out of the smart things to say, but I do agree. But so do you guys just want me to go through really quick our tiers so everyone has them on the record? We will post a list. Look at this internet and whatever. I have an idea. Let's post these on Patreon as well. So we're gonna post these on Patreon, but just so if you want to hear them now, so my favorite, we all have 4 tiers. My favorites in order are LA, Seattle, Washington, Connecticut. Aryeh's favorites is a 3-team group, and it goes Connecticut, LA, Seattle. Rachel's goes.
Excuse me, it's Connecticut, Seattle, LA.
Okay. Connecticut, Seattle, LA. And then Rachel's 3 goes Connecticut, DC, Seattle. Okay.
Correct.
So my contenders is a 3-team group, which is Vegas, Phoenix, and Chicago. Aryeh's is DC, Vegas, Phoenix, in that order.
Yep.
Rachel's is LA, Vegas, Phoenix, Chicago for contenders. I know this is riveting radio. Playoff chasers for me are Minnesota and Indiana. For Aryeh, they are Chicago, Minnesota, Indiana. For Rachel, she agrees with me. Minnesota and Indiana are in her 3rd tier. And then the bottom tier, well, I didn't really catch an order for anybody, but I guess my order would be Dallas, Atlanta, New York, which is the same as Rachel's, which is Dallas, Atlanta, New York, and Aryeh's is.
I would tie Wings in Atlanta. I would tie Dream
Okay.
and Wings. Too close to call for me.
Okay, so that's your tiers starting out right now. So you can be really mad at us on Twitter, and yeah, have fun. We'll give us your tiers online, and we'll talk about it. Because it's February 19th. We're about to run out of things to talk about until like April in like 2 weeks.
Hey, and if we put your team in the bottom tier, then shed a tear for us. We believe the players of the W and its community deserve the same in-depth analysis and respect that men's sports receive on a daily basis. With that in mind, please consider joining our Patreon community to help support us and the hard work that we do.